Life is certainly a blend of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this best describes the year 2022. 2022 is the threshold of 2023, which is an electioneering year with the general elections and national housing and population census a few months away. Though 2022 has been most challenging economically for many Nigerians, the year 2023 is being anticipated with promises of greater, united, and more purposeful Nigeria. And so, on this edition of Frontiers, we will go down memory lane to the year 2022. I am Obiageli Ugoke. In taking a look at the year 2022, we have Dr. Obinaya Urapa, a public affairs analyst. You're welcome to Frontiers.
Always my pleasure.
This is Frontiers, and it continues after this timeout. Stay with us. Once more, you're welcome to the program.
Always my pleasure.
Let's start with the economy.
Yes, ma'am.
The year 2022 was actually marked with high inflation. Then came the currency redesigned by the Apex Bank of Nigeria, which is said is aimed at checking the hoarding of the Naira notes. And this got so many Nigerians concerned about the implication of this redesigning of the currency. What's your take on that?
Well, the Central Bank of Nigeria is seized with the responsibility of managing monetary policy and helping the government. It is actually supposed to be the ultimate banker of the government and helps to manage the economy. Now, when in most nations, like they said, when the Reserve Bank or the Central Bank sneezes, the whole country catches cold. So the Central Bank of Nigeria is actually in her right to determine what is best for the country. And I believe they didn't just get up to do that. Nigeria has suffered a lot. Several years ago, you had what you called the open market operation. What was that? A situation where the managers of the economy believed that after proper research, found out that there was more money outside the banking system that was within the confines of the financial services sector. And they had to take a decision. And that decision is not a very palatable one for many, but it's one that the central bank believes would help to bring the economy back on track. And some of the explanations given by the central bank are actually tenable. The fact that you have so much money and inflation rate has gone so high, and then you needed to reduce the cash flow within the system. One of the things that has come up from that policy, the redesign policy, is the fact that from the ATM machines, you would have denominations no more than 200 naira. Prior to this, you had 500, 1,000 naira notes, and there was so much cash within the system. Now, the central bank would want to see a situation where you had digital platforms, so you are also able to track money laundering issues and all of that. And then there's also the issue of security, whereby you have kidnapping going on, and then you have ransom taking and payment with cash. Now, that's very difficult to trace. And then you have a lot of other things, with, drug trafficking and so on. So ultimately, the central bank wants to do a KYC, know your customer arrangement, which is what the banks also do whenever you open an account. Ultimately, I believe that it's with all good intention. Now, to the extent that this is acceptable to the generality of the public is something that is out there. The jury is still out, because you have situations where the POS operators are threatening to go to court. You have other operators who are saying that this would affect their operations and also affect their economy of things. Now, what has happened is that the National Assembly has prevailed and has requested that they give some time to engage the central bank. So the central bank governor has been invited for discussions, and we're hoping that in the course of the the discussions, an amicable resolution will be found, and then we'll come to a middle-way position where everyone would understand and sing from the same hymn book to understand it's that ultimately about the economy of Nigeria. And however we go about this, it's still about Nigeria and its progress.
Okay, now let's take a look at the oil and gas sector vis-a-vis the implementation of last year's Petroleum Industry Act, which gave rise to complete transformation of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, to now a limited liability company. In light of these developments, how would you describe the performance of the industry?
Before you arrived at the Petroleum Industry Act, you also had the Petroleum Industry Bill, which was on the table for several years across different administrations. So we must give accolades to the present government for having the political will to finally take a decision. Now, I think it was a former head of state, Ibrahim Babangida, that said that history will forgive you if you make a step and make a mistake, but history will not forgive you if you don't make any step at all. So in this case, this government had to take the hard decision to make a decision. And if you look at the Petroleum Industry Act, you will see that even the host communities have been accommodated, where they have at least 3%, which is still debatable. They argued over it, but at least this is better than nothing. 3% of the proceeds of the operations of the NNPC Limited and the oil majors and so on. There are different aspects of the Petroleum Industry Act that we may not be able to fully unpack in this brief interview. But back to the NNPC Limited, you would see that the ultimate objective is for it to run as a commercial enterprise, no longer funded by government, and then open itself up to investment. Now, if you look at the case of the Saudi Aramco, and you look at the Brazilian Petrobras and a few other ones, you look at the China and all of those corollaries of the NNPC Limited in other countries, you see that many of them are running profitably. For instance, Saudi Aramco, in 2019, I believe it was, sold about 1.5% of its shares and freed up over $25 billion, now making it the biggest IPO in that sector, in the oil and gas sector. Now, the NNPC Limited looks forward to also doing the same thing sometime in June 2023, where they desire to sell their shares through an IPO. And then if that happens, then we will see an NNPC Limited that would be profitable and that would yield dividends for its stakeholders. I'm talking about stakeholders, the government is there, and by the time it does an IPO, you and I will be able to also buy shares and become owners of the NNPC Limited. Now, in January 2021, prior to becoming a private limited liability company with a board headed by Ms. Dame Okadibo, now it's already attracted over $6.5 billion from the, I think it was Africa Exim Bank. And then you have other investors intending to also invest in the NNPC Limited. The beauty of it really is that the NNPC will now take her hands off the issue of regulating the price of PMS and all other petroleum related products that come from that sector. So it's something we're still watching. We're hoping that it goes the way it has been speculated it will go. Now, we're hoping that this will be an opportunity for the refineries to finally work, because Nigeria is supposed to be an oil-producing country. But Nigeria is a bit of an irony of sorts, where for several years, not a drop of oil has dropped from the four refineries that we have. Hopefully, with the Petroleum Industry Act, the Minister of State for Petroleum, Timi Preseva, has said that by December 2023, I believe it is, that the refinery in Port Harcourt would come on stream and at least start producing. We still have the Warri refinery, we have the Kaduna refinery, we have other refineries that are supposed to, at Atlas Cove and so on, that are supposed to be producing, so that we do not suffer double jeopardy. Because as I speak, the price of oil is on an upward swing with the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Ideally, we should be benefiting, but what is happening is that we are still importing refined petroleum, and that's not supposed to be, because we sell cheaply crude and then import expensively
at a very high rate.
That's not supposed to happen. Ordinarily, we should be enjoying the dividends of being an oil-producing country, just like you have Saudi Arabia and a few other countries that are in the same league with us.
And with the plans to have our refineries working, what impact do you think that will create?
That should be a no-brainer for everyone. If we can succeed in getting refineries working. I had the privilege of being in Warri late last year, and I saw the gigantic refinery in Warri, and I said, in the modern era, what we should be targeting should be modular refineries. Because technology has made it such that you do not need such gigantic money guzzlers that we call refineries. I believe that if we democratize that sector and commercialize it and pseudo-privatize it, you would have individuals who would get into that sector and are able to inject funds raise funds and inject and then be able to free up, what do we can regulate the sector and let them pay taxes, just like have the telecom sector. So I believe strongly that if we have refineries that are working, the crude is already there and that God has endowed us with. Look at the Bauchi Gombe discovery, over 3 billion deposits. I do not know any country that is as blessed as Nigeria, because for over 40 years, we've been searching for oil in the north. And we finally this year, early November 2022, discovered, and the president was there to cut the tape. And then we are hopeful that with that, we'll have more, how do I put it, more deposits, and then we're able to explore and exploit more crude oil. Now, if you have refineries, yes, you have, beautiful, if you have your own refinery, you're able to refine, and then the consumption level, we have over 208 million population. Nigeria is a good market for you to pending when we graduate to the post-fossil fuel era. For now, we are the fossil fuel era. So we just have to appropriate and maximize the opportunity that provides for us. All
right, to security now.
Yeah.
Making a comparison between the year 2021 and this year, would you say that the federal government's fight against terrorism is gaining more ground?
Yeah, there's been some incremental progress made. We're not saying we're at El Dorado. Insecurity is a global issue, we must concede. As much as we also need to get everyone that's responsible for providing security in the land to be on their toes. Now, the experience of the Abuja-Kaduna train attack, where 8 lives were lost and over 100 persons kidnapped, and then fortunately they have all regained their freedom. The experience on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, where a deputy vice chancellor was kidnapped and a few other people, Pastor Ranti's daughter, lost their lives, and all of that. And now those experiences are not supposed to happen because they will affect foreign direct investment, because all that needs to happen is for potential investors to hear the things that are happening, and bad news travels very fast, and they begin to reconsider whether to come here to go to a few other countries that are also attractive destinations for foreign direct investment. So I believe that security is a bit better, because I believe that the president, being the commander-in-chief, has had cause to call the service chiefs for meetings severally. We've had situations where there have been an uproar from the public, from the National Assembly, from everybody, and security meetings have held, and I believe that everyone now understands that this is something that needs to be done. Because if you have the security, then the issue of food production will be better, because a situation where farmers go to the farms and are not able to farm, and even when they finish farming are not able to harvest, you're going to have a food crisis. So I believe that everyone understands that we are all in this, and then if we do not put our hands on the plow and make sure that we get this resolved, we're going to have a big issue. Now, the roads are supposed to be a bit better. Now that the Kaduna rail train movement is back, now prior to when it wasn't there, the roads had to be manned, and a few other roads had to be manned by the police. And we must also give some accolades to the police for putting in the extra efforts to ensure that the roads and our bushes are a bit safer. But that's not to say that it's El Dorado. We still have issues of kidnapping and so on. And then the Air Force recently rescued some Chinese that were kidnapped somewhere around Kaduna and so on. And there have been bombardments in all those forests and so on. The truth be told, actually, Nigeria is paying the price of what happened in Libya. And we've had cause to say that severally. And then the issue of how do I put it, desertification, where you have migration down south, and then you have green areas within Nigeria. Now, you're definitely going to attract marauders and a mixture of all manner of people, some for genuine reasons, for the wrong reasons. At the point that Gaddafi died in Libya, you had to deal with weapons that proliferated across board, militias that were uncontrollable. So I think we should have prepared for it. To the extent that we didn't prepare adequately for it, now that we're dealing with it, we just all have to put hands on deck, and everybody, public and private sector, government, and all of us must join forces to ensure that we are properly secured.
All right, we'll pause for a break. I'll get back to you. This is Frontiers, and it continues after this timeout. Stay with us. Thanks for staying tuned. The 2022 flood has been described as the worst in recent times, having led to loss of many lives, affected critical infrastructure, houses, as well as agricultural produce. What's the way out of this perennial disaster?
Well, with my background in insurance, I'll tell you that everything is about risk management. risk will happen. There's what we call force of nature. Now, Nigeria has over 400, has a shoreline that's a very lengthy one. And should be a blessing, actually. By the law of the sea of 1982, we have access to over 400 nautical miles into the sea. So it should be a benefit. But also realize that as the ice keeps melting in the Arctic region, now the water levels will keep rising. I'm talking about climate change. We are paying the price of climate change, and there is parts of Nigeria at the low level. Now, not to talk about the issue of the dam in Cameroon, that if the water is opened, you're going to face those challenges. So in 10 years, we had our worst flooding ever in 10 years, going back to 2012. And what I think we need to do to protect our agricultural produce and so on, because we're dealing with a Bayelsa, a Delta, and a few other countries that produce your best snail. That Bayelsa alone can produce rice that can feed West Africa. The snail from Bayelsa can go around this. And how the non-oil sector is being focused on now to ensure that we grow our economy better than oil and gas. So we can't afford to have over 33 states affected, over 600 persons dead, and then, of course, over 3 million persons displaced. So I think what we need to do is to raise, if you look at what has happened in the Bar Beach area, we need to raise the land level of around the sea areas and the flood-prone areas. Now, if we do that, we also need to build dams to be able to collect the water. And if we do that, it will also help agriculture, because by the time you have dams that are able to get all of this excess water in one place, then you are able to manage your agriculture, and then you can do irrigation and so on. So it's not really something that should have been a disaster. It's something that if we sit down and get all the stakeholders in a room and do what I usually call a stakeholders mapping, a stakeholders engagement and a stakeholders management of the situation, we will be able to get out of the woods. I do not think it's something we should cry about. It's something that other countries have managed. Find out how the Danube River is managed. That's over 10,000 kilometers of water. Find out how other countries have managed in Italy and a few other places. How have they managed to build houses inside water? And how have they managed to do sea transportation? If you dredged from the river in Gwagwalada here to Barrow Port, you'll be able to free up land. And then if you look at what NIWA is doing, 10 meters on each side of every river in Nigeria belongs to NIWA. You can also use it for fisheries, and that can also help your non-oil export and even local consumption. So if you ask me, I always like to look at things from the positive aspect of things. I believe that, number one, let us do what we call a risk management of what our situation is. Number two, let us get all the stakeholders to get involved, get the academia involved. I believe that much research has been done in this area. Can we free up the research and begin to do implementation?
On education, a dark cloud hung over the Nigeria's educational sector for a greater part of the year, owing to the prolonged strike of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU. Now, going forward, how can this kind of industrial dispute be avoided?
Between 1999 and this last strike, we had 17 strikes. As I speak, countries that are surrounding us are benefiting from our students immigrating from here, and then you have so much money, and then it's also already affecting our economy, because if you see, you've heard where even including the central bank has complained about Forex. As I speak to you, our foreign reserve dropped in the third quarter. Why is that happening? Because you have people who ordinarily would have been in Nigerian universities having to fill Form A to buy Forex, to go pay school fees abroad. I just needed to paint the bad news for you. Now, going forward, this is what I think. We need to do exactly what I said before. Get all the stakeholders to go back whatever the agreement that was signed in 2009 was. And also review that agreement and begin to look at what should happen in 2022 and going forward. What type of educational system do we desire? How is it run in Finland? How is it run in Singapore? How is it run elsewhere? What is the nature of the educational system in the United States and the UK? How are they able to achieve that? Are there boards in universities that are able to look at the research of the academia and also sell those research to the private sector? Let me even tell you, the Abuja now where you have the Dangote operating, it's a research that was done in the early 70s. at the State Research Institute somewhere in Kaduna Zaria area. So have we looked at all of the research that exists in these universities? Have we even incentivized the lecturers and all of the researchers in the institutions, the polytechnics, the universities, and the academia to come up with research that can be commercialized? And if they are commercialized, do we have a board that can say, okay, this is appropriate school fees that should be paid by students? And if the appropriate school fees are paid, do we also create a scholarship system for indigent students so that the burden is not always on government? And as long as this continues, you're going to have more strikes. And this is me telling the truth. Like the Yoruba proverb will tell you, when two siblings walk into a room and come out smiling, they have lied to each other. Let's tell ourselves the truth that this is not sustainable. The current situation where we are expecting one source, the government, to pay salaries and pay the leave allowance and pay all the research grants for the lecturers and the researchers in the higher institutions is not sustainable. And to be fair to ASU, what ASU is also saying is not that all the money should come to their lecturers to be paid out as salaries. ASU is also saying infrastructural development in the higher institutions, they're providing for laboratories and all of the infrastructure in the higher institution. The other one is also the issue of transparency. We also need to put in place the right kind of audit system to ensure that vice chancellors and all of the administrators, the registrars, the bosses, and everybody comes to equity with clean hands. Now, this is me being plain to you because I have done all my education here in Nigeria, up to the highest level. And I can tell you that what I see today is not what we saw growing up. I believe that we need to sit down and have an education summit, which I have sent the Speaker of the House of Reps convene, Honorable Bajabia Miller, and then I would thank him. And a few other people who have come together to say, can we prevail on the government and ASU to please sit together on one table? And when they sit, we also want to talk to the Minister for Labor and the Minister for Education and all other persons to also be careful the use of language. It's also important that we manage all of this so that no matter how much you war, you will always do jojo, and then when the agreements are reached, let us commit to it. Sometimes you also may need to take some political decisions.
So the bottom line here is coming to an agreement.
You must come to an agreement.
To tackle this
and follow it through.
Head on. All right, Dr. Rappa, a very quick one before we come to the end of the program. In the light of the 2023 general election, what would be your charge to candidates of the various political parties and also the electorates?
Just to say that there is only one country called Nigeria. I hold a green passport. And I don't want to jabba like the young people are saying because of the sapa. But the truth be told that I don't want to be a refugee. I travel out all the time. I just want to still eat my pounded yam and my gari and ofe egusi. I want to be here. I want to enjoy the Hamatan. I don't want to be dressing up because the weather is cold. I love Nigeria. So that's on a lighter note. But that's also very serious. I strongly would prevail, like everyone, the NIRECON, the different peace committees, and every other person, including the man on the streets. We are pleading with the political elites to please understand that we have only one country called Nigeria. No matter how bad it is, we can still work things out. Okay? Like Mahatma Gandhi would say, be the change you want to see. Now, let's also understand that if we can just be sincere with ourselves, get the heart of the people before you ask for their hands.
Exactly.
It's like marrying a woman. Get the heart of the woman before you put the ring in her finger.
Before you ask for her
So
hand
do your
marriage.
campaigns, please. And I'm actually excited with what I'm seeing. At least the four major ones, NMP with Senator Kwakwanso, Labour Party with His Excellency Peter Obi, APC with Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, PDP with Atiku Abubakar. I am excited. This is a beautiful 100 meters race. So let everybody line up, and we are excited that INEC with the Beavers has said it's going to be transparent. And with the experience of Ekiti and Osun and a few other states, we have tested it and seen that technology can help us to walk away from the electoral system being compromised. Now, we believe that these are astute individuals who have been given the ticket to run on the platform of their parties. Now, and I believe they've been around. They should not jeopardize the future of Nigeria. There are still young people who would want to also hold those tickets tomorrow. So I would encourage them to please understand that after this election, there will be another election come 4 years or 8 years. If it doesn't work for you this time, it may work for you next time. And even if you don't win, you mustn't win. Not everyone, it's 208 million people. Not everyone will be president. It's like the walking
To
one
all
person
join
with a
hands
cup.
together and work towards
together,
free,
building Nigeria.
fair, and credible
Credible
election.
elections.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Always a
Obi
pleasure.
Naya-Urapa.
Always a
I must
pleasure.
confess, you've given us the greatest insight that we need on year 2022 events. Thank you for coming on Frontiers.
Always my pleasure.
We have been looking at the year 2022 and the performance of some key sectors of the economy, and our guest has been Dr. Obi Naya-Urapa, a public affairs analyst. As we look forward to the 2023 general elections, ponder on this popular saying, talk is cheap, voting is free. Take it to the polls. Your vote is your power. Use it wisely. Wishing you a very happy and prosperous 2023. I am